Hangout on Air is live. It shows my microphone is muted, but it doesn't say. It's a public one, so maybe go to Google Plus and search for SLC SQL User Group Hangout, or just User Group. Let me see if Andrea is on. She said she was going to join, so. I don't see anybody else, though. I'll screen share. Yeah. If nothing else, ask her to jump in and see if she'll validate for us. So that's being shared, and that's the big question. I'm curious if it shows up that they see that.
Well, that's the last one. That was last one. That kind of money and see if it does. If you can see your profile. It's public and I'm posting it, so like that. Yeah. Now, and see if you're seeing it. Yeah, I know. That's the big question is how well is it going to handle that? Yeah.
You can see the PowerPoint? Okay. So
The slides are on the left, but
it shows both of my screens?
yeah.
Oh.
We're, showing the front half. Weird.
Because I don't see that at all. I see the projector version. You know what? I wonder if that's so delayed. Well, what it's showing to me is, yeah, that slide deck still. Okay, so let's do screen share. Let me screen share full screen 2. There. Now they're going to see the waterfall. And I'm going to put the play to this. Now they should see that. That's my hope. I don't have anybody else on it anyways yet, so maybe it doesn't matter that much. Can you turn up your sound and see if you hear anything? Come on in, we're just trying to get the Google Hangout working. Attempting. Oh, yeah.
That's what, about 2-3 minutes away?
Is it seriously that long?
I don't know, how long ago did you say that?
A little bit.
Like a minute?
That's the problem with Intermountain Guest Wireless Network. Okay. I don't.
Says you can see YouTube.
I have a feeling that it's showing both. She gets a little split screen.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about turning off my webcam because that's just going to eat up more bandwidth.
Not bad, could you YouTube?
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we'll probably get started. Nick is, the other presenter is a little late anyway, so we'll have a little time. So, my wonderful, brilliant newsletters. If you ever wonder who writes these, it was me, so it's kind of horrible. I was going to mention a few housekeeping items. This event, like if you didn't get this, I've tried to approve everybody now, so hopefully you've gotten this, but if not, scalability experts, Microsoft and HP are holding a data warehouse, is the data warehouse dead discussion, and they'll be doing it at Fleming Steakhouse, I believe, in the downtown Salt Lake City area. You can use that link to go and attend that. You'll get free lunch, drinks, discussion about data warehousing, stuff like that. So they're just putting on the event. We're letting everybody know about it. Michelle from Progressive Finance is looking for another database engineer. We've got one gentleman here. What was his name again?
Dan Hadley.
Dan. So you get to work with them if you want to apply for that. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hopefully you didn't just break your phone. Hey, Scott. So, but yeah, Progressive Finance is looking for one. We've got one other job over at Health Equity you can mention to us and tell us about.
Yeah, I'm a developer at Health Equity, and our senior DBA is looking for help. Wants a DBA from the probably heavier on the administration side. I mean, that's what DBA does, yeah, but really an administrative centric role. And we're growing, we just need more people.
Okay.
So anybody, that's fine.
So, Health Equity, Progressive Finance. There's other ones out there too that I've heard about here and there. You know, if you're ever looking, let me know. If you're not, or you're considering, it's a good time to let somebody know as well. Really, the best time to find them is typically in the spring months, and then it kind of goes over in the summer, and then sometimes in the winter too as well. So, those are the things that I had on the meeting agenda. There are some big data things going on as well. The big data user group is meeting on Wednesday, 6:30 again here. You can find that at uhug.org. And they're getting ready to kick off their next competition, Competition 2.0. I guess I should say I'm getting ready to kick off the next competition since Nick and I are doing it. The competition will all be about air quality, and it's going to be really interesting because we're going to stay together as teams basically from June until August, and then we're going to split off and actually turn it into a competition. So it's a great chance to learn about how to collect big data, what to do with big data, some new technologies in there. So there's going to be all sorts of meetings and stuff about that all throughout the summer to collect the data we need. And then we're going to actually have the competition. So, of course, that'll end somewhere around September, October. We are currently planning the next SQL Saturday. It'll be SQL Saturday and Big Mountain Data together. We do not have a firm date yet. I am working on September and October right now, but I cannot give you a date until my location comes back to me. So, but expect that September, October, a SQL Saturday and Big Mountain Data event together once again. So, and we expect, 300-400 people there. Be a great event. All sorts of wonderful topics. Anybody make it out to Open West this weekend? Open West was really good. I went to a day of that. It was an excellent conference. There's also coming up in May. Is it May or is it June? Agile Roots. There's an Agile Roots conference coming up. I don't remember the exact date, but if you look for Agile Roots, you'll find it. Any other events that are coming up that people know about? And there's a whole lot of how many people want to find coding things for their kids in the summertime. I know I do, because I want them to do something more than just play games the whole time, all summer long. There's Utah Geek events that I write the newsletter for. We'll be sending out a list of coding ideas for kids in the summertime. So go out to utahgeekevents.com, sign up, and you'll get our newsletter in the next few days. That'll talk about all those different events you can participate in. Some of them are events, some are just, hey, here's Khan Academy, here's code.org, those sort of things. But if you've got kids that are interested in programming, or if they're not interested in programming, you want to get them interested in programming, this is the list to do it off of. So, okay, 3 viewers. Hopefully the viewers get to see everything I'm seeing. All right, let me go back to the presentation now. So we're going to go around the room really quick, and let's move that. And introduce everybody. Also, though, I'm going to do just a quick Bytes presentation. I kind of shrunk down the performance tuning presentation because Nick Ortman is coming to talk about AlwaysOn. So hopefully you got that email that I sent out this morning that talked about a little bit of the differences. So I'm going to go over some of the performance tuning. It'll be kind of a quick mashup sort of thing. And then Nick will be talking about AlwaysOn. So let's go around the room really quick and introduce everybody. Martin, you are first since you're the first in the row. Get off your phone and talk.
Martin Miller from Data Architecture.
Okay. Scott, all the way across.
Scott Efron, data analyst, health.
Okay.
I'm Jeremy Allen, database administrator.
Okay.
Juliana Zamora, I'm the data analyst. Aaron Laboratories.
I'm Steve Jefferson from multiple data analyst.
Okay. Go back.
Dan Halley, Progressive. I'm a database engineer.
Okay.
Wesley Warren, I'm a database engineer at Progressive Finance.
Okay.
David Martin, the AlwaysOn.
Howard Markham,
Oops, that was me. Silence your cell phones.
DBA over at State Office of Education.
I'm James Guy, DBA at Foundation Financial Group.
Oh, sorry.
Brian Russell, DBA over at
Daryl Henderson.
Okay. And one the second in the end.
Luke Stoddard, DBA from
Okay, so we're going to go over, like I said earlier, I'm going to go over some performance tuning things, some things to talk about. I love for this to be a discussion. If you've got things that I didn't think about, or if you have seen things you've seen in the past, please let me know. Performance tuning is a black box. It changes constantly, okay? It's not one thing for everything. There's no solution to every single problem the same exact way. Performance tuning changes all the time. You're always learning, so if you've got suggestions, please let me know. I broke my own rules. I do not have an About Me slide. My name is Pat Wright. I run the SQL Server Users Group. I am the president of Utah Geek Events, and in my day job, I deal with databases and data technologies. So I work a lot in big data right now, and I also work a lot in SQL Server. Okay, I've been doing it for 10 or 11 years, and love it to death. So, all right. The first thing I do whenever I'm looking at performance tuning queries, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump between slides in my execution plan kind of a lot to show you different things. But what I always say when I'm looking for things on execution plans is I always say follow the fat arrows. A lot of people will say, okay, well, why don't we look for bookmark lookups or key lookups or things like that, or why don't we look for large things? If you follow that giant arrow in your execution plan, you're going to find where the data originally came from. And I'll show you what I mean by this. Since I have an execution plan up, now the question is my screen share still got it? Let's see. Let's make sure that I'm screen sharing the right thing. There. Okay, so I've got Plan Explorer up here. How many people have heard of SQL Sentry Plan Explorer? Okay, everybody needs to go download SQL Sentry Plan Explorer. Does everybody know what an execution plan is really quick? Okay. Everybody needs to go download SQL Sentry Plan Explorer. It's a free tool. It looks much better than the SQL Server Plan Explorer, which I won't pull up because I won't have anything that connects to it. But it looks a lot better. Oh, you guys could have told me it wasn't on the screen. That just wasn't fair. That wasn't fair at all, really. Okay, and now it's showing up in the Google Share. Good. Okay, so SQL Sentry Plan Explorer. Basically, you save a SQL query plan inside Management Studio. It saves the little .SQL plan, and then you open it up in this. Okay, like I said, free tool, much better way to view your execution plans. All right. Now, what I mean by fat arrows, this isn't actually a query that was running on my database servers just a couple days ago. Okay, you can see this nice giant black arrow that's up there, right? If you follow that black arrow, down all the way to the right, you're going to find most of the reason for its issues. Yeah, I know, I just lost it again.
Did you already talk about how it's different from the existing management SQL?
Well, the differences are, so I didn't. Some of the major key differences are, one, it handles very large plans much better. So this little GUI, this little design, it spreads it out a lot better. It handles moving around in very large plans much better. The main second key point that I have is that it breaks it all apart into statements. So each statement I can look at the plan based on what's inside there. It also tells me all of the plan tree and the operators and what their costs were. So again, I don't know how many people have looked at an execution plan. All of these things are available. They're available in the little properties that you see on each item when you hover over, but this puts it all in one spot, makes it really easy to read, and it's really, really nice. Okay? So I can't say enough good things about it. I do not work for SQL Sentry. They have bought me a beer before, but that's got nothing to do with this. So, but trust me, when I have to do lots of execution plan work, I do it inside Plan Explorer. I do not use Management Studio. I save it and I bring it over to here. Another thing I like about saving it, one second. What I like about saving it is I can keep lots of histories of plans. So I've got all these plans sitting in my folder that I can look at. Go ahead.
So when you say you save it, you just export out the execution plan from Management Studio and then import it into this? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, so if you're in Management Studio, the way you save it, I don't know if this will run or not because it's not a, yeah, it's not a table. Let me try one of my own. You right mouse click on the execution plan. Oh, thank you again. 2 screens is killing me. I should just mirror, shouldn't I? Okay, so here's the execution plan as you see in Management Studio. What you do is you right mouse click and you say save execution plan as. And then when you save it, it saves it into a directory. And you just name it plan dot, well, it takes care of the SQL plan. But you just add that onto there. And you save it. And then you can open that up in Plan Explorer. Where is it? Where's my mouse? It's over there somewhere. No, it's over here. Yeah, mirroring would be good here. Yeah, see, I shouldn't be going through all this, should I? There you go. So that's what the plan would look like inside here. So it's as simple as that. If you own a copy, you know, if you have a full version, you can do this directly inside inside Management Studio, or it copies into here if you buy SQL Sentry's products. So there is a way to do that. Like I said, this one's free. I just use the free one. It works for me. I don't need anything else.
So what's the main difference between the free and the one that costs?
Like I said, the one that costs has a lot more features that go along with it. This is the one we were on. It has, as you can see here, Pro. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can get into there. I would suggest go ask them or go look at that. I couldn't tell you. I don't use the Pro enough. Yes?
One big feature of the Pro version is you can have multiple tabs and you can compare execution plans for them.
That would be nice. You saw I can only have one open. So in the Pro version, you could have multiples open.
Okay, so you can have different versions of the service.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, different versions of the execution plan. So, but again, I use it particularly for this. So, okay, so original statement, follow the fat arrows. You always follow the fat arrows down to where they go to tell you what's actually going slow on the execution plan. You can see as I follow mine down, mine come down to an index scan, meaning I'm scanning my entire table instead of seeking my entire table. Everybody understand the difference between a scan and a seek? Your goal in any stored proc or any query really should be a seek of some sort. Because a seek means that the database found the found the data exactly needed quickly. If it's scanned, it looked for all the data. It didn't find it that quickly. Okay? So in this case, this one is having an issue scanning lots and lots of tables. This is actually a CTE as well, which we could talk about at a different time. So, okay, so follow the fat arrows whenever you're looking at an execution plans. What else do you look for inside execution plans? There's another big one that I love to find. Does anybody think of it?
Percentage of total cost.
Percentage of total cost. I don't look at that as much. It does tell you.
Go to the left a little bit.
Yeah, I know. It's right up here. Right there. Well, percentage of total cost. So what Martin said was percentage of total cost. When you look at an execution plan, it gives you a highlighted percentage of total cost to tell you kind of what is the critical point of this plan.
Like on that second level, the hash match.
Yeah, this one,
28%.
28.4, right. And it's doing a lot of data. Again, you look at the fat arrow, you find this percentage, you say, wow, it's doing 28% of my time is right there because it's huge, and what is taking up the most time. The reason I don't hit the percentage cost too much is because typically what happens is you say, okay, great, this hash match is my problem, but how do I fix it? I fix it way back there. I fix it way back to the right by changing how much data actually comes back. That's why it's 28%. It's 28% because it's so big and it's doing that. So can you reorder it? Can you pull less data? What can you do to change that? So that's why I look for a lot of the arrows. The other one that I want to bring out that nobody mentioned, my favorite one in the whole wide world. Where is he? I know him. What? Yeah, there they are. There they are. So if you're as old as me and you've been using SQL Server for a while, these used to be called bookmark lookups, but now they're called key lookups. Key lookup means that SQL Server found the data you were looking for, but it was not in the index you used to find. So it has to go back to the database again, well, back to the disk or memory, and get the rest of that data. This is known as a key lookup. When this happens, you can easily fix these if you do a better indexing strategy and you make covering indexes. Covering indexes being the where clause has one index, and then you add those columns that are included with it as included columns. This helps you to eliminate key lookups. It's one of the quickest ways to make query performance changes. Now, you have to use that carefully. All of a sudden, if you go in and add these everywhere that they are, before you know it, you're going to have 15 indexes on your table and you're not really being productive. Okay? So think about things before you put too much on there, but it is something that I always look for. I always look for those key lookups to put covering indexes if I need them. Okay. We'll jump out of execution plan for a minute, go back to this for a second. So we kind of talked about percent cost. Sargable versus non-sargable. Who knows what sargable is? Search argument. Okay, somebody else raised their hand. Search argument. What do I mean by search argument? I'll bring up a query so it's easier for everybody to understand. Let's make sure this one's on the screen. Good. Correct. So, where is my example of some of these? I think I have a like in here somewhere. Okay, so these are search arguments being provided to these queries. Scale ID is in this specific number. Answer ID is greater than this number. Scale type is equal to single. Now, these are all hard-coded values, essentially. So these are going to be sargable because I'm not doing any sort of calculation on the right-hand side of the equal sign. If these were a like statement, or heaven forbid I type inside here, let's say this was not equal to 1, that would, well, that's probably a bad example. I'll talk about not equal in a minute. 1 times, let's do something silly like response ID. So what I've done here is I've said, okay, this number times some sort of column in my query is what I want you to figure out. Now SQL has to go to the database again and look up that value and figure that out for every single row in your table. This will cause an index scan. This is not an index seek. It will say I must figure out that value for every single row in your index and then figure out whether or not it matches. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So sargable, the other big one that you get with sargable is likes. Everyone likes to do likes. Yes. Yeah.
Just seems you.
Well, that's not good. We don't want her to see me. Let's try that. Okay, that might help. Hopefully she can see that now. Okay. So, like, okay, let's look at this one. I'm searching for like Pat. Is that sargable? You know what, I'm going to make this a little bigger because it's hard to see. So, like Pat with a percent sign, is that sargable? Yes. Why? It's on the end of the percent. I mean, the percent is at the end. Yeah, two ways to say the same thing. So it's sargable because the percent is at the end. As soon as I add one, as soon as I stop zoom it, like that, it becomes non-sargable anymore. Because it's saying I would like to find Pat anywhere within the string. Once again, it must scan the index. Yes, sir?
So you're saying if you just add the percent sign in front, it will actually go to the C versus.
This will make a scan. This is bad. This will scan.
Percentage in front.
Percentage in front, or around both, or if I do this, so both of these, I'll show you, that one, and if I have a percent assign on around both of them, will make a scan of an index.
Oh, okay. I see.
Those are the bad ones. If it's at the end, if you do a starts with of the first characters, then it will seek. Because the way SQL Server works with indexing is that if it can find the first few characters, it can do a seek on the index. If it cannot, if it's saying I want to find anything inside that index, it has to scan the index. Okay? Does this make sense to everybody? So scanning is always bad. I actually mentioned in one of my points here too, when you're looking at your execution plan, look for things that say scanning. Okay? If it says table scan, index scan, find out if those need to be done. Form them into seeks of some sort. Okay? And if somebody says, well, an index scan is the same thing as a table scan, that's very debatable. All right? It really depends. But a lot of people will say
they're a little bit faster because your index is narrower.
But I say it depends, not because of the way the index is, whether it's narrow or not. Martin mentioned it's narrow or not. But a lot of people move their indexes to another disk. If disk had better performance where your physical table was, you could have a big difference.
Well, and also getting back to your point about key lookups, if you're doing a table scan, once you finally locate the rows you're looking for, you don't have to do that key lookup.
Right. Right,
so if
exactly.
You do an index scan, you still have to do the key lookup after you find the rows.
Yes.
In your index.
Yes.
So there's a cluster index.
If you're doing a clustered, a clustered index is your table if you're doing an index scan. But again, think about, some people separate their indexes and their tables. And if you had a clustered index on a faster set of disks that was in a different spot than your table, you could actually see a different performance based off of that. What?
A clustered index has the data with it, right?
Right.
So it would be.
We're talking about an index scan on a non-clustered.
Oh.
Yeah. Again, the key thing here is look for things that say scanning. You want to avoid these things that say scan. You want to try to get them out and get them into seek situations. Okay, another one that I mentioned in here, and let's see if I have an example for it. Do I have a conversion? Oh, that's just a really bad one.
Just a comment, you said that scans are always bad. That's not necessarily true.
No. I said look for things that say scans. I didn't necessarily say they were all bad. You're right. At sometimes they are. But when you're looking at an execution plan, if I'm trying to go over somebody's performance, the first thing I look for is scan. And I try to find out if it's an index scan, table scan, some other sort of scan that would affect the database. So you're right. Not all scanning is bad. I caution that with an it depends. Okay? Conversions are bad. Here's an example of one. Conversions make your query not sargable. And the reason it makes your query not sargable is the same thing I said earlier. It must calculate that value for every single row in the table to figure out what it needs to compare to. So it will form an index scan if you are converting on data, like I'm doing here, okay? The better solution is to declare a variable at the top of your procedure, set it to something, and then use it throughout the procedure. That will avoid those scans that come across. Well, and the date add. I'm doing the get date, I'm doing a date add here. I'm actually changing time. It should be 1 or something like that, but yeah, there. If we take away a day. So what it has to do is it has to figure out that date for every row in the table. I should declare this variable up at the top, set it equal to that, and then use it throughout. And then the query will be startable. It will do a seek. If I leave it the way it is right now, it'll use a scan. It'll scan an index. Okay? Make sense to everybody? Okay. Other things to look for. Let me go back to this PowerPoint. There we go. Conversions, things talking about scanning. Large table joins. I kind of mentioned this last because there's sometimes a necessity, but always think about, hey, if I'm left joining, am I left joining to a really, really large table? Or am I joining to a really, really large table when I only need this much data? These are things you have to look for when you're looking at a query and you're considering it. Again, it kind of comes back to looking at the execution plan and starting with follow the fat arrows. If there's a big giant arrow, then that's probably a large join. Yes, Mark?
Also, if your join conditions are not indexed, like if you're not using declared referential integrity,
right,
and you're joining on columns that are not indexed, those are going to be killed.
So Martin brings up a great point. If you're not joining on the columns that are indexed, that's very important.
Well,
or
you're
using
not indexing the columns that you're using in your join condition.
Yeah, that's another way to say it too, yes. So make sure, whatever your join statement is, I think I have one in here that I can show. Make sure you are indexed on that join statement.
So if you're joining on
right here.
foreign keys, declared foreign keys, then they're automatically going to be indexed, right?
Right.
But if you're joining tables on columns that are not declared as foreign keys, then you have to be really careful that those columns are properly indexed.
Are somewhere indexed, yes. So when you're considering making your indexes, you got to consider the where clause, the join clause, and then what are you selecting back? Your where clause, your join clause usually forms your key columns, and then your columns in your select list could form your include columns to do a covering. Yes, sir?
Well, it's still indexed if you use the no check when you're doing that, or the relationship.
The foreign key no check?
Yeah.
Yeah, it still creates an index for it. It still creates the structure. Yeah, I wouldn't see any reason why it wouldn't. Yeah, it should. Yes?
I was just going to say, is there any best practices so you don't have more than X number of indexes on pages or anything like that?
Yes and no. That's best practices for how many indexes to have on a table. Universally, I would say when you start to enter the 10 to 15 range, even in some cases, you should start considering. On a heavily reporting database where you've got a lot of reporting going on, maybe you'd be up to a 20 or something like that. But you have to be careful, in other words. Too many indexes cause you problems. They really do. They cause your maintenance problems. They cause your inserts problems, your updates problems. So I can't say there's one best recommended number, but you should be cautious of it as soon as you start hitting a high number. Yes?
Just to add on to what you just
Yeah.
said, a lot of it depends on how that table is loaded. Is this a table that's bulk loaded, manually or something?
Yeah.
If so, index the crap out of it. Because you can always drop your indexes, bulk load it, and then rebuild your indexes. But if it's a table that's populated by single inserts, like in a transactional sort of way, that's when you have to really be careful about how many indexes you're putting on that table, because every operation is going to fire the same operation against all your indexes. Every insert, every update is going to fire an insert and an update on every single index on it. So,
Yeah. So
how the table is loaded.
Right, but if it's bulk loaded, index around.
no, you drop the indexes, then you put them on after.
Bulk load it and rebuild them.
Yep. Yeah. So Martin brings up a good point. To kind of put that in a summary sort of thing, know what your tables are used for. If it's a highly transactional table that's getting reads and writes a lot, you're going to have to be very careful what your indexes are. If it's simply a loading data import, some sort of bulk table, then yeah, you could take the approach of drop everything, load it in there, and then put it all back to based on your needs. That's why I mentioned reporting tables. For reporting needs, you want a lot of indexes because you want your queries to run fast. But when data's coming into it, you want less indexes because you need that data to come in quickly. So, good. Did you have a question? No, I guess not. Did that answer your question? So again, we can't really say there's a perfect number because there's not. There is limitations in SQL Server, but, well, actually, did they even take those out in 2008? There was 32 in the past, but I don't think that's still there.
For clustered indexes, I believe it's 1024 now.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, more than you would ever.
Mm-hmm. There was a limitation. What?
Per table.
No, per table. Yeah. There was a limitation less than that at one time.
It used to be 256, and it was, it was based on the size of the name.
Right.
So, they were using
that's right. It was
an 8-bit index identifier, so that limited you to 256 per table.
Right, and now it's gotten big.
It's 1024, which is
yeah.
more than anyone would
ever want to really put on there. Yes, yes. Yeah, and again, it's really, it depends. I mean, the databases that I have right now, I probably have some with probably 20 on them. I really do. And I know of databases that have that. And it's because of poor application design along with reporting that has to be done to put it into that situation. But you should always consider, whenever you're adding an index on there, consider it. Is this what I want for the future? How do I want to handle this? Take that time to think about it. Okay. I'm almost out of time, but I haven't seen Nick come in, so we're still good on time.
That's me.
Yes. Oh, you're okay. Well, let me do one more slide, but come on up and get ready. All right. Okay, so the other ones I want to mention on the execution plans. Not in or in. These are both essentially or conditions. Okay? With the not in, you always want to be careful about negatives. Whenever you're doing queries, look for negatives. If somebody is very negative, that's a bad thing in queries. Okay? It usually means scans. If you have to do things from not in, it's a scan. Okay? So try to be positive in your queries. We're all happy, feel good, go lucky sort of thing. Or is always something you should look for in your queries as well. You should always question why an or is there and what you need to do with it. They're perfectly valid. They should be there. But when you're doing with very large sets, like 5 million row table to 5 million row table, and you say, I want to say or these two, you're going to have a really, really big result table. You're going to have a really big virtual table it's working on. So think about that before you act on those. Like, again, we already talked about that. Likes are good as long as you make them sargable. As soon as you say like %%, you're going to have a problem. Joins, again, same thing. We already talked about this. Make sure they're indexed and make sure what sizes of the tables that you're working on. And then functions is the last one I'll mention. Functions should always be questioned whenever you see them. I don't care what kind of function it is, always question it. The problem with the functions are that in the community, a lot of DBAs know how to use functions, but a lot of developers don't. They think they are nothing more than functions that they use inside code, which is absolutely untrue. Okay? Functions can be very, very dangerous. A couple weeks ago, a nice little CTE paired with a function brought down one of my database servers because of the rows that were being passed into it, and not realizing that, oh, it actually does the work on all of the rows, not just one, or not just one little piece. It does it on everything. So if you see a function, a table-valued function, a comment, what's the other one called? Somebody help me out here. Scalar function, thank you. Please look at those. The key to scalar functions is pass in the data, do calculations, and that's it. Don't have it go out and call and get more data inside the function. Pass it everything it needs. Don't let it go anywhere else, and you'll be fine. If you make it go and read other data, you're going to have problems. Okay? And table valued, be very careful about how much you do. They're huge. They can be very large. So, okay, that's all I had. We'll let Nick get some questions. I'll hang around for a little bit, but I mean, I'll be here the whole afternoon, so we can ask about that later. Any other performance things people can think of really quick? Yes, Mark.
Set statistics IO.
Yes, a
If you
great.
turn that on before you run your query, it'll tell you what your physical reads were and your logical reads. And the reason that's really helpful is because the first time you run a query, it's going to be slow, but then you might change something and run it again, and it runs fast, and you think, oh, I fixed it.
Right.
No, you didn't fix it. That
It's
data was just
buffered.
in the buffer cache.
Yep.
But if you use the set statistics IO, then you can look and see what the actual physical and logical reads were and judge by that whether or not your change that you made really had an impact.
Yeah, great point, Martin. Thank you. Yeah, excellent.
Write down your logical reads.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? So let's give Nick a minute to switch out, and then we'll get started again. So thank you. You've got VJ, right? And can you sign into Google? If so, then we can screen share yours.
Yeah.
I think I can give you permission, and that way you can screen
Do
share.
you have mine? I can.
Let's see.
You want to?
Oh, if you're just going to do slides, then you can put it on here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do slides and then
Okay.
we can talk about it. You know, I don't have anything on my computer there. So.
Do you have the slide deck?
I sent you.
Oh,
the
you did.
slides,
You did.
but-
You're right. Let me get it.
Yeah.
I bet you I
That'd
can
be
get it.
easier.
And then you
See
can
how
just
you
use
got
this.
everything set up.
Yeah. Hand me that. I'll reset it. So it doesn't. No, this. I always use a timer.
Oh, okay.
That way I know I'm not going over too far.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna try to get through the slides real quick and then we can talk about it the rest of the time.
Well, yeah, and you got plenty of time. So.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see here.
I'm just gonna show you.
Wow. My inbox has gotten to become the worst search in the world.
Should you just look? Ortman, O-R-T.
It doesn't work.
Oh, there it is.
No, I know, but
You want me to resend it?
no. Just give me a second. I'll do a phone.
Okay.
I don't know what's happened to my search, but something has broken it. There's the attachment right there.
Cool.
AlwaysOn.
Did you have a chance to take a look?
I didn't. I have not. So I'm probably still screen sharing, aren't I?
Yeah, I had a couple of people look at it, so I think
Why is this not coming up? Okay, close that. Outlook. Please wait for the viewers on the call.
Huh.
No, I don't want to close that. I want to
That's
close
cool
that.
that you do a webcast.
Yeah, we started to.
How many
4
people?
right now.
Oh,
So not a ton.
still, that's cool.
I've got too many Nicks in my life.
Can you download it?
I don't know why that didn't open. See, it's like it opened and then it did.
You save it to your desktop. I have to keep looking.
There we go. All right, there, now it's local. And so now we can do screen share of that. And you can use that to change. And then let me get it connected back to the screen. Hey, if you're still on with Andrea, see if she sees the AlwaysOn thing. So, remember to repeat the question.
To repeat the question?
Yeah, because these guys won't be able to hear if they ask a question.
Oh.
Anybody out in the virtual audience won't be able to hear.
Okay. So this is the mic.
No, the mic's on my computer. That's what I mean. It's not.
All right.
Definitely gonna have to.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's the one we want right there. And then if I hit play on this, there we go. Now that should be up, and that should be up. And will you verify? You can just use that to go back.
Okay.
Will you verify with it?
So I think you're ready to go, but let us verify real quick.
Okay. Yeah.
Seeing that, what are you using now? Are you using that?
Right now, it's showing the left side, but that could change.
It's a little bit. I shared the second screen, so it should be good now.
It went back to camera. It's showing that.
Yeah.
Okay. It should be. But why is my... I don't want my Outlook up now, though. Yeah, it must be. Close that. There. There we go. Okay. Now you are ready to go.
How about it?
Okay. Are we good with the other people?
Yep.
Good.
If he's seeing that, then it should be fine.
Okay. Who in here has heard of AlwaysOn with SQL Server 2012? So we got a couple of people that that don't. So this is just an introduction. It's real simple. So I'm just going to try to get through the slides, and then we can answer all your questions. I'm a consultant, so I work as a database consultant, and I have a couple of clients that use AlwaysOn. So I had opportunity to work with that and find all the fun nuggets from it. So I'll go ahead and share that with you. The objectives that we're going to go through is just kind of understand the AlwaysOn basics, how it's set up, what are the parts of it. We'll identify some advantages and disadvantages of it. Do a quick overview of a typical install. This is more of a conversation between me and you. We're not necessarily going to go through each individual spot. I don't have enough time to do that, so we'll just go over the main points, and then you can work on it at home if you like. You'd probably have to set up a network and all kinds of fun stuff in order to do that, but there is capability of doing your own little environment to test it out if you like. So we'll also discuss some tips and tricks of what I found out and what's most helpful when you're doing it. So assumptions that I have of you, they always say never to assume, you make an ass out of you and me. But hopefully you guys know this, so we can go through a lot of these things. Basic Windows Server operating system, basic Windows networking and clustering, basic mirroring, and log shipping concepts. All of these technologies are still used in AlwaysOn. They've actually moved all those into this package, so to speak. So all that knowledge that you have from log shipping, mirroring, Windows Server failover clustering applies to AlwaysOn. So don't be afraid in that sense. It's not necessarily a bunch of new technology. It's just a way that they're being used. So keep all that knowledge that you have and bring it over to AlwaysOn and their high availability. SQL Server backups and restores, SQL Server Transaction Log chaining, basic TSQL and Management Studio skills. We expect, or I assume that you know that. A lot of the AlwaysOn is log-based data movement, so there's times where you'll get kind of waits and things of that, delays, because it's waiting for the destination to harden. So your log file might grow quite a bit, and some people will freak out. If you just do a log backup on the primary, it'll clear the log and you'll be okay. But we'll get into those. So AlwaysOn is just a new integrated high availability and disaster recovery solution. If you're familiar with failover clustering instances, it's the same technology, it's just different in the way that it's packaged. They have provided some extra nuggets and gold awesomeness to it. So, right? So So failover clustering instances was the existing, so that was prior. It was introduced in SQL Server 2005. Now in SQL Server 2012, they offer always on, and always on adds to that. So we have availability groups, and so I already talked about the always on failover clustering instances. So that actually came from SQL Server 2005, but we're adding to that in 2012 with availability groups, which is a new feature, and it's database mirroring that uses log-based data movement. Here's some different solutions that you can have. You can have the multi-site failover clustering instance, which we discussed before in 2005. So that's like when you go into Windows Server failover clustering and you have a clustered instance of SQL Server if it fails over to the other cluster. That has been around since SQL Server 2005. Availability group is this new and awesome technology that they provide. It allows for the database mirroring and offloading backups to the destination, things of that nature. There's a lot of advantages to it. This slide here kind of talks about kind of the main points that we had. I looked for several hours trying to find something that's an introduction, that's very cut and dry, easy for someone to understand. There's not really anything out there, so this took me hours to put together, so I hope you enjoy. So the last point is where you actually combine the two, where you have that failover clustering instance where it can fail over from one node to the other, and you can also have that high availability groups and mirroring for that disaster recovery. So there's a lot of power to this. So I highly, and I know a lot of people are afraid to move over to the latest and greatest SQL Server. A lot of people want to wait until the next version. I would suggest not to. I would move up to SQL Server 2012. There are a lot of advantages to this. I wouldn't wait until you get an R2 or anything like that. The benefits from it are better than the risks, I guess, if that makes sense, if you're waiting for all the bugs to be worked out. So basic install of Always On, it uses Windows Server 2008 or later. Each server is a node in Windows Server failover clustering. You're going to use SQL Server 2012 Enterprise. That's where it's available. There's talks that it may be available in even the free versions going forward. I don't know. That's just kind of hearsay from now, but it would be really nice. What you do is you set up standalone instances of SQL Server, matching correlation, everything of that nature. So you want to make sure that they match, but you set them up as standalone, not clustered. So that's a big point. So you can have up to 5 instances acting as replicas, 3 configured as synchronous commit, 2 configured as asynchronous, the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous, you won't lose any data. It's moved like that. Asynchronous is there's a delay. The big advantage of asynchronous is you don't have to wait for the destination to harden. So there's been some issues that I've had with one of my clients. Their server was on a network that wasn't that great, on hardware that wasn't that great. If they ever had to fail over because of an issue, they would be in a lot of trouble. So the hardware didn't match production, and the network was crappy. So it was basically a waste of money. So that's one thing I have to stretch. If you're going to do a disaster recovery, make sure that your hardware and everything matches. There's no point in having something set up to go to a server that cannot handle the workload. So,
a question on that. 5 instances acting as replicas for the server, in other words?
No, so this is all database level. So failover clustering instances is server level. Always On is database level. You mirror per database.
How many can you have?
You can have up to 5.
But I mean, if I have 3.
Oh, how many databases?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I don't know. You'd have to look at that. I don't know what the top number is. So here's just the basics of Windows Server failover clustering. So we're pretending that we're going through an install. I hope you've seen that before. You would set up your Windows Server failover clustering. You would set up your SQL Server instances as standalone, not clustered. You would add them each as a node. The whole point of AlwaysOn is to use the technology of Windows Server failover clustering as a base. It doesn't use this, so whenever you have the name, you're not using the Windows Server failover clustering name. You're actually using the group listener from SQL Server. You're doing all the managing from SQL Server, not Windows Server failover clustering. I just had a talk with my client today, and he thought that you use Windows Server failover clustering to fail over as well as use that as the name. No, that is not right, so don't do that.
This is the Windows install screenshot?
Yeah, so this is a Windows Server failover clustering install that we're doing. So we're just going into the features, we're adding our failover clustering.
Well,
So
it has to be on.
it has to. So
Regardless if you're in a cluster.
it has to be in a cluster. So it's using the technology from Windows Server failover clustering to allow that mirroring and all that fun stuff. So that's why. So we're setting up standalone instances in our cluster, and then we're using that technology. We're just piggybacking off of it. But we're not using the cluster name from the server failover clustering. That's a big no-no. And we're not failing over using Windows Server failover clustering. It just provides the base. Okay. So here we are. We're adding our nodes. We set up our SQL Server instances individually as standalone, and then we're adding the server, the physical box to each one of our cluster. We can give it whatever cluster name we want. We don't care about what it's called. We're not going to use that. So there's some certain things that we'll get. A nice thing about the Windows Server failover clustering in the newer version is that you can have a file location set up as your quorum, basically. So it allows you to set up a file share to act as the quorum, to be the tiebreaker, which is a new technology in Windows Server failover clustering 2008 and above. That's why. So it allows for AlwaysOn to work. So here we are. We're giving our Windows Server failover clustering name, but we don't care what it's called. We can call it whatever we want. So file share acting as a witness, that's what I talked about earlier in the version 2008 and above. So that's why you have to have a server 2008 and above to be involved in this. So once we go ahead and we set up those all individually, then we go into each individual instance. We go into Configuration Manager, we go into the services, and we turn on AlwaysOn for each one. So after that, we can use our Availability Group Wizard. You go into Management Studio, right-click on Availability Group, go into New Availability Group Wizard, and just kind of walk through the process. You can add individual databases like we have here. So those are the ones that meet prerequisites and that fit. You're going to add a full backup and a log backup. Like I said earlier, it's all log-based data movement, so it has to be in full recovery, and we have to do a tran log backup in order to get it all set up and jiving. I do not believe so. I can't say for 100%. It might require a restart. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking as well. I think it might require a restart just because it's the service and the service would be running, so you'd have to restart the service. That would make the most sense, so it would make more sense that it would have to require a restart, but I can't see. I don't remember. Okay, so here we have all our different instances that are set up as always on. Kind of what I want to get and drive home is think of this as your Windows Server failover clustering manager. You're never going to use that again, right? So we're going to be using SQL Server to handle that and manage it. So we can assign roles and we can say, all right, this will be the primary, this will be the secondary, so is this, automatic failover and high performance. That talks about kind of the synchronization of it. You can say disallow connections from the secondary, so we keep it hot, so it's ready to hand over if we need to. That's a big thing about disaster recovery. If you don't care, you can allow connections and you can allow people to report on that mirroring, and you can also do your backups, which is a big advantage of having always on, is you can offload your backups and offload a lot of that work. So endpoints and the listener. So always on is very hungry for IP addresses. You're going to have a lot of those. So there's one for the listener, and there's also one for each server. This allows it to communicate. So just be ready to be shelling out IP addresses. The listener. Yep. So the listener is set up as the Windows Server failover clustering name. If you want to think about that technology, the listener is basically the cluster name, and that's the name that you'll use to connect your applications. That's the name that you'll be used for everything, basically. Oh, and you can change what port. Right here, it's the default 1433, but if you want to have fun and have better security, you can change that. Here's the always on dashboard. So we'll have right here, we have the different instances. Here are the databases. If everything's green, then happy, healthy. There's different synchronization statuses. Asynchronous will show synchronizing. A synchronized status would be more of the synchronous versus asynchronous. So here's kind of the network map, or the layout map, of how this technology works and how it's based off of Windows Server failover clustering. So we use that as the base, and then we have our availability group network name. That's what we use to connect. We have this availability group, which is different databases here. This is the primary replica. As you can see here, we're using our failover clustering instance. So we can fail over to one node or the other. So that's using that technology from 2005. These other ones here are the ones for database cells, and those are secondary replicas. I don't know if anyone has any questions about this. We can talk about it. Go ahead, Pat.
No, always on. So it has to be based off of the cluster.
Yep.
Do all the servers that are available to OpenAI have the same amount of
Yes. Yes. They have to be a node in that cluster.
So it can't be just some node out in some data center.
It can be in another part of the world, and that's what's nice, because you can use that file share. So it doesn't have to be on the same disk or hardware. You can have it in another place.
But it's still got to be in that same cluster.
Yeah, it has to be in that cluster.
So it has to be in the same domain. The Windows Server cluster has to be in the same domain. In other words, that's a that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, but it's possible. Right? Okay. Okay, so secondary replica backups, it must be in the synchronized or synchronizing status in order to perform a backup. This is the biggest thing that I think AlwaysOn offers, is the mirroring as well as the backups. That's a huge advantage. So for the secondary, we can now do backups, and we don't have to wait until the weekend or all this. You know, we can really stress out the hardware on the secondary and not involve production. So if you need to take a full backup takes 2 days. Who cares? Let's run it on this. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do. Also, I don't know if you're aware, but if you have multiple files and you back up including the files, you're going to get a lot higher performance. That's something that's a little bit different, but I figured I might as well mention it. So if you did a backup database and backed up the entire database, that's going to be slower than if you do backup database, specify each file. So
on the secondary, when you're doing the backup on it, what if it's in asynchronous versus synchronous?
it doesn't care. So the difference between asynchronous and synchronous, so synchronized would be synchronous. So synchronizing would be asynchronous.
So, but your backup, in theory, could have whatever that delay is based on.
Right. Yeah, so there's some hardening involved. So that's one thing that I ran into issues with my client is, you know, we're waiting for it to harden. The log is getting bigger and bigger and bigger because it can't release that. We have to perform a backup. So the world is ending, and now we have this huge 300 gigabyte log. And what do? It's eating my disk. I can't take a backup on the secondary. What do? All you have to do is take a backup on your primary. It will also back up your secondary, and then it will relieve that space. If you freak out and continue to try to back up on your secondary, you're going to be in trouble. So, I mean, it's not all that technology that you've known before applies. It's not complicated.
Any idea why differential
My ventured guess would be a differential is a difference between the last backup. If we're doing copy full backups, we're not having a hard tangible backup. So how do I know what the difference between that last full is? I don't know. That would be my guess.
But you can do log backups.
So that's the big part, is you can do log backups. The big thing about copy-only fulls is you can take a full backup. So if you had to, you could restore to that point. And then you could apply the logs going forward. Okay. So copy-only logs are not supported on the secondary. So if you take a log backup on the primary, you can also take a log backup on the secondary. It works. There's different ways on how you can handle that. Which one should I do? I don't know. They involve that, so we can do that as well. So where do I back up? Not synchronizing, available, unavailable, or if there's a failover, how do we handle that? There's two ways. We can handle it in TSQL. There's a function that they allow us to have. We just have to pass in the database name and say, hey, is this the primary? If it is, yes, let's go ahead and perform that backup. The other way would be through the GUI, and you can specify, hey, I want this one to have such a priority. This one has the highest priority of 80. This one is 50 points, so we're going to try here. That doesn't work, we're going to try here. So this handles this. This is also available in maintenance plans, so you can go into a maintenance plan and select that. And this is what it looks like in a maintenance plan. So for availability group databases, ignore replica priority. If you don't, then it will in the background make a lot of magic and do what you need it to do. And it involves that same function there.
If it backs it up on the secondary, does you need to restore it to that one?
That's one thing that I wanted to talk about in the tips and tricks is if you're going to be doing backups, it's smart to have one backup location. If you have multiple locations, where are my logs? I don't know. One's here, one's there, one's there, one there. You know, it's better to just back up to one file share server location. So if you have to restore, you know that the logs are this. Probably look into more is the backup chain. You know, how is that involved? I haven't had an opportunity to look at that, how it's logged. I don't believe in the backup history that it tells you a full, you know, chain, because if we take a backup here, it's going to be in that history. If we take a backup here, it's going to be in that history. So I don't think that's involved. I do VDBA monitoring, so that's going to be a big thing to look at, because if we're trying to see has this been backed up in time, that's one thing that's going to add a lot of intricacies and fun. So let's go into the tips and tricks. So tips and tricks, initialize big DBs with backups, no recovery. That is a big trick that I would tell, is that there's certain things that you do with the GUI and there's certain things that you don't do with the GUI. The GUI allows you to do things, but whether you do it or not is the question. So it allows you to say, yeah, I want to take a full backup, then I want to apply that. If you allow the GUI to do that, then it's going to take a full backup, and then it's going to take a log backup, and then it's going to do all this, and you'll have your GUI sitting there for 10 plus hours just spinning its wheels. Another way is you can initialize it. You can take that full backup, you can restore it with no recovery, and then you can synchronize it with the GUI. That's what I would suggest, and it allows you to say, hey, I already have a backup that I restored, so why don't you use this, apply the last log, and then we'll be back in sync. So if it says not synchronizing, that doesn't mean that it's not working. Don't freak out. You can relax and you can wait. It is log-based data movement. If your network is slow or you have slow hardware, it's going to take time to harden. Remember to breathe, time heals, so that goes along with the not synchronizing. If this data has to move over and you have a lot of data and your hardware can't support that, you're going to have to wait for it to do that. Do you have a question? Okay. So one thing that I would suggest, if there's a problem, you have to break it. I would suggest to remove from the primary first. That's your production server. You want to relieve its stress. Who cares about the secondary? Let it chew all you want. I would relieve your primary, your production server first. The GUI is not always the best, so don't think that you can use the GUI for everything on AlwaysOn. If you think that way, you're going to be in a world of pain on certain things. One thing that I would suggest is to use jobs to remove it from the secondary. The issue I had with this client is their hardware was not up to par. It didn't even resemble anything close to the primary. So when I tried to remove it from the secondary and I used the GUI, I had to kill it. It would not allow me to shut it down. It wouldn't allow me to do anything. If I let it sit there, it would run for 2 days before it removed from the hardware, from HADR. HADR is just high availability disaster recovery. That's a simple TSQL statement. Alter database name, set HADR, high availability disaster recovery, off. That's all you have to do. It's very simple in terms of the TSQL. If you need to drop an availability group, you just say drop availability group. I don't know the actual TSQL, but it's pretty simple. Well, I mean, you could use the GUI. The GUI is simple to use. I would suggest if you're going to use the GUI, use it for the primary, not for the secondary. It's possible that your hardware is a lot better than this client, and that would work, but for this client, I had to set up a job and run it that way. So, backups on the primary will not break always on, so don't think that you can't do a backup on the primary. You can still do your full backups. You can do any kind of backup on the primary. If you need to relieve your log and clear your log, you would do a log backup on your primary to clear it. So centralized backup location was one thing Pat was talking about earlier. If you're taking backups from all these different locations, it's best to have one central location. So if you have to apply the logs, that you know where they're coming from. So this is my questions, and that's my joke. Alter table audience, add question. Alter table audience, add clue. Select star from audience where clue is greater than 0.
So when you drop the KPR from one of the secondaries, what does that leave the other database covering?
So if you, yeah, exactly. So
Can you bring that one online? Can you do it from
I think I did before. So yeah, if you break it on the primary, that is going to be causing issues. I'm not sure. I think you can bring it back online because I did try that, where you can bring the secondary back online, but you're still going to have that issues because it's still part of that high availability disaster recovery. So there's things saying, oh, I'm on this, I'm still a part of this availability group, I still want to be a part of your group or your fund. So there are certain things that it will not like. So I would suggest not to keep it on, just to drop it. You can also, if you need to, and you don't want to wait 2 days for it to drop, you can do a restart of the service after you broke it on the primary, and that will also do the same. So you can just do a restart on your secondary and then drop it if you want.
replication part of always on is replication also?
So it always on is basically replication. It's mirroring. So we can have that same reporting the same as that. You wouldn't set up replication and always on. That there's no reason to do that. Yeah. And this is all log-based data movement as well. Replication uses a little bit different way. They may have used some of the technology, but it's more mirroring. I would think of it more as mirroring and log shipping than replication.
Does it ship the log, or does it just ship the transactions?
I think it ships the transactions, and that's why you
That's
have.
what that asynchronous and synchronous commit is. Does the primary wait for the secondary to commit the transaction before it can commit itself?
Right.
That would be synchronous.
Right.
Asynchronous is it just commits it and then lets the secondary know about it, but it doesn't care if anyone commits or not.
Right. That's all the hardening. So, yeah. So it's all log-based data movement. I would think of it more as log shipping than anything else.
Well, the log shipping is sending the entire transaction log over.
Right.
Is it doing that, or is it just
No.
sending the individual atomic transactions?
It's more the individual transactions, but what I'm trying to say is I would take the knowledge that you have from log shipping and apply it to this. Obviously, it's not shipping in each individual file and applying that. Like you stated, it's most likely it's doing that individual transaction. That's why we have those IP addresses. They're used to communicate, and they're used to keep everything in sync. But then again, we're going to have a lot of IP addresses because we need each IP address for each node to say, hey, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. What do I need? And then you also have the listener that is used as that failover cluster.
You can do those backups and set up in the secondary. You can report out from there.
Yeah, you can report. Think of it as mirroring. So it's the
Except for with
same.
mirroring, your mirror is in standby mode, it can't be, whereas this, it can be a read-only.
Right, but it's mirrored data.
You set it for your own.
Yeah, but it's mirrored data, right?
It's awesome.
Have you recorded it? Probably won't go on data
But you can run your ETLs to that data warehouse, not.
Right.
That would be the best way.
And you can have views, or you can build up into, that's where all your data comes, and you pull it into this other database or things like that. There's a lot of awesome things that you can do with this. So I highly suggest that you move up to SQL Server 2012 and start, because there's a lot of things that you can do with this. And if you wait until, the R2 comes out or they work out all the bugs, you're going to be missing out.
2014 is already out.
Oh, is it?
Isn't there R10?
Okay.
So 2012 is already old.
Well, it's awesome. So, I mean, it's a lot of fun to work with. So I would suggest to get into it.
Already shown that.
Or just go to.
Oh, don't even. Chance.
Okay. Were there any other questions or any comments? If there's anything you don't understand, we can go into it a little bit deeper.
Cool. All right, thanks, Nick. And I don't have anything else for the afternoon, so you're welcome to hang around for a little bit and chat. Otherwise, I hope to see you guys all at one of our future events. Like I said, SQL Saturday in the fall, and then we'll have some summer events and stuff that we'll probably talk about coming up too. You'll see newsletters on it if you're on the newsletter. Okay, thanks everybody. I don't have one yet because my location is still confirming. Right now, probably late September, early October, but my location is still confirming. So until I hear from them, I can't say anything. So I'll get it as soon as possible.
So are these meetings Mondays?